Minimal encouragers are grunts, groans, smiles, nods, and small gestures to let the person know we are listening. You can also use short words such as really, so, then, carry on. They work because they acknowledge our attention, and they also reinforce the fact we are giving them the turn to speak.
We went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, flew in from New York to Myrtle Beach.
Oh, and then?
Well, from Myrtle Beach, we had to drive, or rather to South Carolina, we had to drive to the hotel. Well, we got to the hotel, obviously checked in, the rooms were really nice. We did an initial sort of survey of the space, and it seemed like a nice space, and so we were prepared to have a good vacation.
Nice. And after that?
Well, that was day one. We had dinner that night, and then day two.
I'm now going to talk about 2 caveats regarding minimal encouragers. Be aware of words that impose your persona and ideas. Remember that you can never be in their shoes, and your goal is to get them to talk. Secondly, be very aware of the word okay or similar words, because they tend to stop the conversation. They work like a period in a sentence.
There was a vacation that was really probably one of the highlights of my parenting life when my wife, my daughter, and I, and my wife's Aunt Tia, we went to Florida.
Okay. More importantly, they suggest a subtle agreement.
While returning with my wife and daughter, as we were walking through the hotel, going back to the room, there was a guy, I presume another patron, he had a bag, and he bumped into my daughter. Then he turned and he said, "You all should just get out of my way." And then I told him to go f*** himself.
Okay. Open-ended questions are questions that invite people to talk. It works because we get them to talk and explain things the way they perceive it in their own words. Some examples can be, "So, what happened there? And what did you do? What are your concerns about this? How would you like this to work out?"
My wife and I saw a movie about a month ago called Trumbo. It was about a screenwriter in the late 50s and 60s named Dalton Trumbo, who was prosecuted, convicted, and went to jail and blacklisted because he was associated with the Communist Party.
One thing you might want to keep in mind when using open-ended questions is to mix them with other specific questions from time to time. Otherwise, it may feel unnatural. Reflecting is deceptively simple. It is basically reflecting or echoing the last word the person said. Sometimes, however, you might want to reflect a driver or keyword, something particularly important you have picked up in the conversation. For example, in the sentence, "When I was a kid, my dad forced me to clean up my room every day." You can reflect or echo the word every day to emphasize time and frequency. Or you might choose to reflect or echo the word force to bring attention to the relationship between myself and my father.
Yes, my Uncle Hugo.
Hugo.
As a teenager, he was involved in gangs. Yes, was rather violent. But my memory of Uncle Hugo is that he showed me pornographic material at age 4.
4?
Yes, which probably, isn't appropriate, but...
Reflecting can be obvious and annoying. If you get caught reflecting too much, just say sorry and carry on. Also, be careful not to overly direct the conversation. Emotional labeling is stating your impression on how the person is feeling, thinking, or really saying. Some examples are, "It sounds like," "I sense that," "I get the impression that." Emotional labeling works because it's non-accusatory, and basically it's a win-win situation. If you're right, you have just made a connection and obtained insight on what's going on within the person. If you're wrong, You give them the opportunity to correct you and tell you how they really are feeling. Emotional labeling can also help you build rapport by identifying emotions that the person has not been able to recognize yet.
I spend most of my time performing my spousal and fatherly responsibilities when I'm not working.
I sense that there's some frustration there.
There's not frustration, it's just that when you have responsibilities, that means people count on you, and that can sometimes be daunting.
It sounds to me that you take fatherhood very seriously.
Absolutely, because my daughter didn't ask to come here.
There are a couple of important caveats regarding emotional labeling. Use non-judgmental words. Avoid the word upset. Also, make sure not to attribute the listener with a thought or emotion. It will only anger them and make them feel defensive. For example, if I say, "You're angry" or "You're afraid." Rather, make sure to put the action and therefore responsibility for interpreting those emotions on you. It is much better to say, "I sense that you're angry," or "I get the impression that you are afraid." Oof, that is quite a lot. And we're only halfway there. Let's take a quick break to let those techniques settle in a little bit. This is a very good place to discuss variety. In an actual conversation, you would mix those techniques so they would sound natural. Also, take into consideration your own characteristics and style and mix the match. For example, Jane might be better at emotional labeling and reflecting, while Mike is much more comfortable with minimal encouragers and open-ended questions. Paraphrasing is saying in your own words what you understood they have said. For example, "She's always talking and never listens to what I say." You can paraphrase it as, "Oh, she doesn't pay attention to you." It works because it shows the person that you're paying attention, and it also allows you to check for understanding.
If I had one day that I would watch old black and white movies, as an older person, it seems to me like most of the current movies aren't made for me or those of my age group, that they're made for younger people. So there's a lot of explosions and slow walking and all sorts of unnecessary things. Whereas those older movies, the writing seemed to have been a lot better.
It sounds to me like that you prefer substance.
Absolutely. Like my wife likes to say, I enjoy a good story that's well written, and that's probably what I like.
Don't try to go further than what the person is trying to say. Remember, you are trying to find out what is upsetting that person, not do psychoanalysis. iMessages are rather common, but they're somewhat difficult to explain. iMessages state feelings that you, as the speaker, feel when talking to the person. For example, "I feel sad when you ignore me because I thought we were friends." iMessages work by making a point without making the person defensive. They are a non-aggressive way to state a problem. It allows you to challenge negative behavior without blaming the person or creating an issue. Also, it shifts the attention of the conversation to you, making the bond more personal and allowing them to take a bit of a break.
You know, I don't really want to talk about that too much.
I feel sad when you don't engage with me. Can you tell me a little?
Well, the first 6 years of my life was spent there, but I don't really feel comfortable talking about that for... Well, you know what? I don't think you'd understand.
I feel frustrated when you don't consider me a friend. You can open up to me. Tell me anything about your childhood.
I do consider you a friend, but there are things that... certain experiences in life where we're not necessarily comfortable disclosing them, and that's one of those areas of my life.
With iMessages, make sure the action that they are doing is not too judgmental, confrontational, or insulting. For example, "I feel angry when you're such a jerk." Also, in a security context, iMessages can be a little of a gamble, as the person may simply not care how you feel. Effective pauses or silences is putting some carefully placed breaks in the conversation. Use it to emphasize a point, such as immediately after something meaningful. Curiously, he encourages communication by making them slightly uncomfortable with the void in the conversation.
Yeah, Ramon. I mean, he had his moments when he was pleasant, but for the most part, he was a bit of a bully. And I remember he and I got into a fight, and then I went home and told my mother about the fight, and then my mother came into the street, went into the schoolyard with a machete and challenged to fight Ramon, and he backed down because of the giant machete that my mother pulled out.
Naturally, the pause has to be very well placed and not too long, as it might indicate lack of interest or acknowledgement. Summarization simply means summarizing the conversation or parts of the conversation back to the person. It is, in fact, a very simple technique, but has many benefits. It helps you remember what the person has said, it helps you identify details that you can ask about later, and it gives the person a chance to check on what you have understood and make corrections. Very importantly, it gives you thinking time. Some examples of summarization can start with, "Let me get this right," or "Correct me if I'm wrong."
I like New York City, yes, I do.
What do you like about it? Can you tell me?
I like that you don't need a car. I like that there are different kinds of people, and as a result of different kinds of people, there's different kinds of food, different types of social experiences. And you know what? Yes, the weather is perfect because we have seasons, and the only season that I can say that I don't like is winter. And depending on how extreme the winter is or is not, it's probably still going to be okay because we'll be dressed appropriately. But yes, in many ways, the weather is perfect.
So if I understand correctly, you like New York because you don't need a car, because you get to meet people from different backgrounds and have different experiences, and also because the weather is good. So even though it's cold, you still seem to manage.
Yes, because it's only in winter when the cold is arguably unbearable.
When you encounter a gap in the summary, and there will be many, refrain from trying to fill it yourself. Rather, take it as a great opportunity to ask the person to do it.